Hello, everybody, and welcome to that Milan podcast. Martino Puccio, Matt Santangelo, and a guest alongside us for today, as you can see at the bottom of the screen, Christian Aquino. I guess just from Milan Twitter, I guess we could say is the best possible introduction. But we've all been following and been friends for so many years now, right?
Yeah, 7 years now, I think.
Has it
So
been that long?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been a
So
while,
it's
man.
long time.
at the very least, yeah. So a long time. Finally getting him on the podcast after yesterday. Went live on the channel after the match against Liverpool. We had Fabio on. Fabio was going crazy. I'm sure a lot of you enjoyed that, and if you enjoy more of it, you could just go back and watch it under the live tab on the channel. But gentlemen, when it rains, it pours, and it just kept pouring at San Siro yesterday. Milan just got destroyed by Liverpool. This wasn't shocking to anybody, because Christian, obviously, you live in England, so you get to watch plenty of Liverpool. Even despite the loss against Forest, I was saying the same thing. They were still not. They weren't terrible against Forest. They had some opportunities to score on them, and Forest were very organized. They're even more organized than Milan it's ever been this year. So to me, the way Liverpool play under Arne Slot, this wasn't surprising at all, and it could have been worse. Maybe Milan deserved a second goal, if that, but I don't think they were really in this game, even after scoring the first goal. Like outside of that, it just didn't feel like any part of this match they were in control. So, Christian, you can go ahead first.
Yeah, I mean, I said to a lot of people going into the game, a few friends of mine who are Liverpool fans, I had a really bad feeling about it. I just saw how bad we've been defensively, and I expected this. I was surprised we even scored, but I guess it was in the first 2 minutes, and
Yeah.
then Liverpool decided to play. But I just wasn't surprised, and I think that kind of just sums up Milan right now. Results like this, they don't even come as a shock anymore. We all expected it. I think maybe then a few optimistic fans, but I don't think anyone really expected us to win. That's how bad it is right now.
I don't even think a draw. I think a draw would have been surprising for a lot of people with the
Mhm.
way they've been playing. Matt, 4 of the first 5 matches, they've conceded at least 2 goals. In many of those matches, Parma and this one could have been more. Uh, like, just what do you even say at this point? Because there isn't. We've talked about tactics and formations on how to potentially, put a band-aid on this, and there's just not many options at all. Because there's no central midfielder to place in front of this defense, and the manager is still refusing a 4-3-3 because he just said that in his press conference yesterday or post-game press conference. So
Yeah, no, I think coming into this game, obviously, as Christian just mentioned, hopes were very low. I don't think anyone had any expectation for this match. I think ahead of the derby, more importantly, fans just wanted to see that we were heading in the right direction, right? I think the bar was pretty low in that sense. We had the victory against Venezia. Everyone knew and understood that that wasn't really a proper measurement of how good Milan is, stacked amongst some of the best teams in Europe. Even in previous years, we've seen Milan when, despite, Pioli not getting it quite right or certain players not being on form, more or less, we seem to be a little bit up for these Champions League games. The results didn't always go Milan's way. I mean, you look at the first year we returned back to the Champions League. We played some pretty tight games against Atletico, Porto, Liverpool, even away, where, even if we weren't, stacked with the talent, in comparison to our contemporary, we really showed up. We at least showed some sort of courage on a big stage, a stage that we've fought so valiantly to get back to after years of not being there. So for us to come out with a stinker of this magnitude is very upsetting. It's not surprising. And I think it's one of those things that, Milan fans going into this game they were just trying to, visualize something to latch onto. Hey, maybe we sorted out our defensive at least a little bit. Hey, if we lost 1-0 and we couldn't go forward and get goals, fine. At least we were a little bit more, established at the back, or maybe we had something different in the midfield to compete with the team at this level. But we just didn't get it. Outside of the Pulisic goal, which came in the very early part of this match, you still had to go, almost 90 minutes and, with leaning on your Achilles heel at this point, which is your defense. And of course, it's the one game where Mike Maignan gets injured, right? It's inevitable. In other games, he didn't really have a chance to save anything because he was put in such an obviously bad position. But then in a match like this, you're like, okay, well, it's going to take something special from him as well. He gets injured. He comes off. It looks like he's going to play in the derby. But when it rains, it pours with this team. The fact that we didn't show up on a big Champions League night to start things, it's a really bad spot for Milan, and it's full on panic mode right now.
The defense, I know, because people want to ask blame for players now, right? Because the topic of conversation is constantly the manager with this. There wasn't a singular good defensive or midfield player yesterday. You could maybe say like Pulisic had a good overall match, especially if he nabs a goal, but it just feels like insulting in general to the fans to just say that was a good performance out of like a bunch of bad players.
He had a moment.
He had a moment. I think Leao had a couple of moments. He should have released someone on the right side. I think it was Pulisic when he went down on that counterattack. He just didn't get rid of the ball. Whether or not it was contact for a foul is different. He just couldn't get that out. I think there was another counterattack as well with Loftus-Cheek, who again still isn't this type of player. Loftus-Cheek has Theo and Leao, where he has Theo in front of him and Leao's a bit further. He passes and skips Theo and goes right to Leao, which I prefer the buildup of giving the ball to Theo where you have Leao out wide after the fact. There just was all these little things in these counterattacks that were disheveled. Leao also hit the post, I believe, at one point too. So those were really their chances. They were few and far between. But the set piece defending, we'll start at the top with this because it involves Christian's favorite player in the squad. And Davide Calabria, this was really bad ball tracking in general. How late he is to arrive to where the ball is. The timing on the tackle was just not even close. It was a clear yellow, especially after seeing all the replays. That leads to that great position for Liverpool to take a set piece. And again, I guess they try to go zonal marking on a set piece. Tomori in this instance, I think this is completely on him, not completely on him. I believe Fofana was bailing on Konate, but Tomori's reaction time to where Konate is. When Tomori realizes that Konate is finally the guy that he has to mark, Konate is making contact with the ball in the middle of the air. It's way too late of a response. And to me, zonal marking is just stupid on set pieces in that area because all you have to do is just pick up a man. The fact that you're giving free reins on both of the set piece goals to the biggest and best athletes on the pitch was just insane to me. But yeah, Christian, it starts with Calabria there. Like that again is just a microcosm of the massive problems that they have. Like, how is he that late to arrive to where the ball is? He looks so inexperienced.
I don't get it because he's racked up nearly 300 appearances for the club, and he's been playing right back his whole career, which has been 10 years now. So you'd expect a player of that experience, well, to be better than he is, but just not to give away a foul on the edge of the box like that. This team has been terrible at defending set pieces for ages. So surely as an individual, if you know that your team is weak at defending set pieces, you would be doing everything in your power to not give away a foul on the edge of the box. And I just think that alone kind of summed up the game. The captain lunging into a challenge, protesting afterwards as if it wasn't a blatant yellow card, and then just the marking, terrible. Do they work on set pieces? Because I've seen better defending, on Sunday League over here. It was terrible.
Well, that's the thing. If you're seeing it on Sunday League, like. How are it's defending 101. This isn't like some fascinating new tactics being discovered. This is just you pick up your man in the area and you make sure he doesn't make contact like he did. Like this is just fundamental. That's the real problem. And the fundamentals are you point in like one or two directions. It's funny to get mad at a manager for not teaching fundamentals when professionals should have fundamentals. That's that's the always interesting part of this, Matt. And it kind of goes to like, who do you blame more? Is it the players or the manager? Because these players have been here for a couple managers now, well, second manager, and they still have these issues. Who is the bigger blame? It's kind of hard to divide this up because I think Fonseca deserves blame for other stuff.
I think, just real quick to kind of goes hand in hand with this, right, question, but I think, just to kind of go back to Calabria, right, because I think, lack of leadership has been a huge talking point for Milan and why they're in the position they're in, right? In moments like this that are very delicate and very tense, this is where you lean on your experienced players or players that have been at the club and they understand the weight and magnitude of the shirt. And Davide Calabria, whether we like it or not, is the man wearing the captain's armband, right? People have mentioned Teo, people have mentioned, all these sorts of figures in this team. But the truth of the matter is 300 appearances to Christian's point, countless appearances in the Champions League and big matches and big derbies. Where's your leaders? Where's Calabria? Where is Teo? Where are some of these individuals who we claim that, no, this person deserves the captain's armband? Where is it in this moment, right? I think people can rightfully point fingers at Fonseca, and I think Kush made some really good points in his video where it's like it's easy to point blame at the coach, right? But let's look at the facts here. Fofana came in late. People have talked about, no, he hasn't played well so far. In the Champions League, he didn't look right there. These players have come in late. The player that looks like the most to have adapted so far is the player that we brought in at the very last second, and that's Tammy Abraham. He looks like the most comfortable player of all the new players we've signed.
And he's the one that no one wanted.
And he's the one that everyone was saying, I know Martino's laughing about that one, but he's the one that Boban's or Capello or whoever saying the only guy out there that looked like he actually gave a shit, excuse my language, was Tammy Abraham. He wanted to do something. He wanted to get involved in the game. Even when the game was out of reach, Tammy Abraham looked like the only one in this team that actually gave a damn. And, I was working, and then after I saw, the results and the reaction, and I saw some of the post-match comments from like Seedorf and Boban and Capello, it's interesting too, because everyone mentioned the same thing, but they said it differently. This team, where's the leadership? Where's the leadership? You sent perhaps the leadership and one of the big key leaders out the door to Newcastle. I understand that every player has a price. In many ways, and I would say, I don't know if you guys would agree on this, there are certain players in competitive teams and big clubs like Milan that are simply priceless. And I think that we were in such a transition when you're getting rid of a leader off the pitch in Paolo Maldini, when you're getting rid of a leader on the pitch in Tonali. I love Rafa. I love some of these guys in the team. They're not leaders. They're not the type of guys that are going to galvanize a group when things go bad. They're not those types of players. They have all the ability in the world. You looked at Liverpool, right? Because that's the team we came up against. And I don't follow them closely. Christian, you might be able to speak on it better than I can. You're, boots on the ground. You live in that region, in that area, and you can kind of get a feel and pulse of importance of players. All I heard about in the years of under Klopp and the successes they've had under him was Jordan Henderson this, Jordan Henderson that. He was a leader, though. Yeah. He wasn't the best player on the 11 amongst the 11 on most occasions. Was he a leader, though? The players respect him in moments of delicacy and intense games and big matches? They looked to Jordan Henderson and they respected him as a captain. Get rid of all of the social media posts by Rafa and this guy are supporting our captain. I'm sorry, but it takes something extra in your personality and in that aspect of the game to be a true leader. I genuinely think that Tonali had that. And I think when you make such widespread, drastic changes the way Milan did, amongst personnel, amongst the market, amongst all those things, it takes something special to be a leader and to thrive in that role at Milan. And Milan simply don't have that reference point on the pitch that when the game going gets tough in game, how do we get the guys together? How do we get back to basics? How do we do certain things? We don't have that anymore.
No, I look at your point with Henderson. Probably, not that he was a bad player, but probably the worst player in that 11. but he was a captain for a reason. He'd been there when they were bad. You know, he was a warrior. He fought for that shirt. The players, I don't want to say feared him, but he was such a presence and he was so loud and vocal that they would want to go to war for this guy because he understood what it meant to take responsibility, wear the shirt. And okay, maybe what he lacked in technical ability, he made up for in other areas. Calabria's Milan's captain, he lacks a lot of things, especially leadership. You know, you don't look at him and say, oh, okay, maybe he's not the best player, but, you know, in tough moments, he galvanizes everyone. Right. People want to go to war for him. He protects the players. He does this, he does that. He doesn't. You know, he's the complete opposite of that. And it's not just him, because Theo Hernandez is the vice captain. I wanted him to be Milan captain at one point, especially from this season. I really like him. I just don't see him as a leader. For me, I think the only leader in that squad is Maignan.
Yeah, but he's tough to lead from the back.
I think Morata is a leader. I just think he hasn't been healthy.
He's new to the club, though, Martino.
I know, but you could still have that immediate respect. I mean, Zlatan walked in the locker room. I just don't think he's had enough time to even play. Like, he had 2 substitute appearances, and this was his first start when they're terrible. Like, they can't even the attack is talented, and I get frustrated with them for their inconsistent finishing. But I have such a hard time blaming the attack when the midfield and defense don't even give them a chance. Just like they don't even give Maignan a chance.
And Martino, your attack right now, the way we're defending. Yeah. So we lit up what? I get where you're 2+ goals in how many games? 3 games?
4 or 5.
You're asking your attack and your offensive players to score at least 2 goals to get a point. Not win the game, to get a point.
Just to survive.
That's not sustainable. That is not sustainable. And all this talk about Calabria too, and the right back situation. And it's just, it's ironic because before even Milan kicked off, I looked and I was on Twitter and I looked at the Juventus lineup. And I look at the Juventus lineup and I wanted to see kind of what team they ran out there, you know, some of the new signings. Isn't it funny how it's Pierre Kalulu who goes out there right back? And I see praise. Granted, it's PSV. It's not Liverpool. And all this talk of, oh, why is everybody raving about Pierre Kalulu? He can't stay healthy. Look, I'm not saying he would have been the solution at right back. I'm not saying he's a captain. I'm not saying all that. But if you're going to go out there and spend actual money on Emerson, and you're going to continuously trot out Davide Calabria, who we know is not the answer, he's looking for more money, and his contract expires next summer.
Yeah,
you have an in-house option. Is anybody sitting here saying, I don't think Pierre Kalulu could have done a job at right back? It just found it funny because I saw a couple people say it
for years.
And I saw a couple of people say it, and I get it's just funny. Milan, who everyone felt got the worst end of that deal, and it just looks worse by the day. It just looks worse by the day and by the performance.
And they're not even going to get that much money for it. No. They'll get like a Serie A winning, capable center back that's plugged into Champions League football, playing well. And I think they're not even going to be paying 22 million euro, I believe. Right. So they're not going to be paying much. Kalulu, by the way, for people who still don't know or don't remember, was a right back coming up in Lyon's academy. So he got switched to center back. That was something we found out and discovered. That was something, Matt, I believe, when you had better sources within the club, were telling you, like, look out for him at the center back position. I remember a few years ago. And he obviously was a part of that run where they weren't conceding. And the only good stretch of Milan defense at the top level outside of, like, Gattuso's tenure that we've seen in the past 10 plus years. Seriously, that stretch of, what was it, a couple months, right, guys, where they were barely conceding was the only actually good above average stretch. Because I know they had a lot of clean sheets under Gattuso, like that Romagnoli statistic of not being dribbled past was one of those things for a while. But otherwise, how many other good defenses have we seen? Christian, you're rather younger, right? You're what, like in your early 20s, I believe?
Yeah, 25 now. But
so when was the last time you were a child, the last time you saw a consistently great Milan defense?
Yeah, last time I saw a great Milan defense was the Nesta-Thiago Silva partnership.
Yes, correct.
What's that,
They were
12,
great.
13 years ago now?
50, it's closer to 15 because it was 2010, 11. I know Thiago got sold in summer of 2012.
Yeah.
So even then, I mean, Nesta was barely a part of the team. It was insane. Just to kind of see this, and now they're breaking records, guys. That we see statistics from Optapalo saying they haven't conceded this much to start the season since 1930, 1938. Like it's insane. The Great Depression was at its peak then.
Italy had a king. That's how long ago this was. I just don't understand it. You know, they bought Fonseca in for loads of reasons, but one of them was because he made Lille really good defensively.
Yes.
After a period of time where they were dreadful defensively, and he made them really good defensively. It's not an opinion; it's a statistic.
No, yeah, that's true.
They had, after PSG, they had the best defense in France. So, you know, and this is with a team who don't have great finances. They bought through a load of players from the academy. They run maybe a little bit similar to Atalanta in terms of how they operate. Yeah. And he was able to achieve decent results. Okay, didn't win anything, but, you know.
He almost won the Conference League, which is still very tough when you have the English teams in there with that. I know Olympiacos went crazy, but yeah.
Yeah, but they came close, and they were good defensively. And his coaching was the reason why. You know, he's got Paulo Ferreira as a part of his staff. You know, he was a good defender at Chelsea and Porto for a while. So these guys know how to organize a defense. And he's had a full preseason to work with a lot of these defenders because most of them were not on international duty.
Yes.
So there's no excuse to say, oh, a lot of them arrived late. He's had nearly a full preseason with most of them. And they look clueless. They look even worse than they did last year. And I don't understand. Is it him? Is it them? Or it's got to be a combination somewhere because it's like someone's just picked 11 random players and gone, you go here and you go there and do this. And it's almost like they've never played together. And this is a squad who have played together for years, most of them.
Yeah.
It's not like it's a team.
I think the midfield is so poor in terms of like fitting in tactically. Not a singular player that is in the midfield, right? The 10 and the 2 players in the double pivot are in any of their natural positions. None of them. One, Tijani is not a 10.
No.
It's been known. He's been box to box for most of his peak. And then you have Loftus-Cheek, who's certainly not a 6.
No,
and then Fofana, as well as the same. Anyone who's seen him at Monaco will tell you, okay, this is the wrong position for him as well. And you're kind of not only forcing them to be in those spots, and Yunus Musa, we could throw his name in too, because he's also not the same. Way too reckless, far better as a ball carrier. So he's not obviously going to be cleaning up at the back and making up for mistakes of other players. There's nobody willing to do all of that dirty work and ball winning. You know, it's insane to me how you constantly misprofile midfielders, force yourself to be married to one formation. Like, why isn't Voss just brought up? Like, just literally throw him in there and just to see what he has at this point. Like, it's so bad and damning at this point for him because also his selections are terrible. Because if they want to play the same style, they're nowhere near the same balance. They're conceding far more opportunities. I mean, it just looks even worse. Like, it was crazy because like people are trying to say like you shouldn't have sacked Pioli now because of that. People are forgetting how many goals they were still conceding under Pioli. That like they were constantly leaking them there. And it's kind of to say to Christian's point, Matt, like, okay, how much of this is him when he wants to bring in more balance, but he's also using the same formation. And largely it's the same players, especially midfielders. They didn't really bring in any new midfielders outside of Fofana, right? That are going to be key integral pieces to this team. So then you're kind of stuck with the same players. Tomori's taken a huge step back after that injury last year. It's really disjointed. There's no cohesiveness. I want to blame the manager, but these players are also so individually awful. Like Emerson Royale, can I blame him? Can I blame Fonseca for Emerson Royale's play? Like,
well, he wanted him. He requested for Milan to
I
sign
know.
him.
Yeah.
So, I
Same
mean,
as Moncada too. I mean, the directors are a different story as well. But
yeah,
I
I mean,
guess they keep on.
forget about them for a moment. But Fonseca specifically requested Emerson, and this is what a lot of accurate sources at the club have said about that transfer. So you've requested a dreadful footballer, to be polite. And look, I thought, okay, maybe he'll revive him. Look, maybe it's too early to tell.
I
Because
get what you're saying.
Milan have a habit of looking at players like, people say, oh, it's a load of Chelsea rejects. They look at players who once had potential, they buy them for cheap, and then they improve them, which isn't an awful strategy.
No, yeah.
But Emerson was anyone who's
universally disliked as a transfer. That I was saying since Kaljanic, right? And everybody said price player, like hell no, please stop.
Yeah, I didn't understand the transfer in the first place. There were better options out there. Thiago Santos, who's worked with Fonseca last year, younger. I think they wanted 12 million for him, which was less.
Correct. It's 12 to 15 million range.
Wouldn't have occupied one of the non-EU slots because he's Portuguese, not Brazilian. I think this whole Emerson transfer kind of sums up Milan, and he seems like a really nice guy, and he's really happy to be at the club. But I would be really happy to be at that club as well if I performed that badly for 4 years and was offered that deal. So I really don't understand it. I just think that kind of sums up the direction of the club and the management, where they go all in on him, and they spent months
with no competition for him.
Well, no, there was none. And Spurs, made us look like mugs. And we didn't sign this guy till mid-August when we'd been chasing him since May. I just don't understand what this club is doing. And that is just an example of it. That is so obvious. It's as obvious as, the nose on your face that was going to be a bad transfer. And this management and Zlatan and Fonseca wanted him. I don't.
Christian. And I think too, we, when we had Tom Scholes, he's like a Tottenham guy. He knows the French division, and we were talking about Fonseca, the prospects of him, and maybe certain players he'd bring with them. And there was the links early on to Thiago Santos, and the point I raised was, well, look, Thiago Santos might be a raw prospect, but the fact that he's an unknown commodity, there's a curiosity there. Like, you might have a player there, and if he's at 12 to 13 million, he's young enough where you can give him a year, 2 years, and fans, I think, can get on board with that, right? Given the fee, given the age, given the familiarity with the player who is tied to the coach, that this management, this ownership, this is their first coaching hire. Pioli was an Elliott, and previously before that hire. So this is their own guy, right? So you're bringing in this guy, and you have a player that, again, we all are in agreement that perhaps Fonseca did request Emerson. But if we're looking at it with a logical approach here, it almost feels as though that it's, again, all of a sudden the entire transfer policy has completely shifted. It's like, are we going for young players? Are we going for players that are a little bit more established? Because now we're stuck with Emerson, truthfully. If he plays well, that's gravy. That's great. We get something out of him. But now you're stuck with a player. If he has one bad year, you're getting another loan with option to buy or cheap obligation to buy, and it's a player you can't move. So it's just kind of, I'm dumbfounded at the whole way this team has been set up post Maldini. And I just want to talk about that real quickly if we're in the whole conversation of management, because I posted the video yesterday, Maldini's quotes in the semifinal ahead of that against Inter.
Yeah, I saw.
And so many people were in agreement, Maldini this, Maldini that. And I had one person comment and say, oh, the same guy that signed CDK gave Macias a new deal and gave Pioli a 3-year contract. And I'm thinking to myself, isn't it funny how CDK goes to his next coach and all of a sudden he's a good player? He's helping them win the Europa League. He's scoring 10 plus goals and 10 plus assists in all competitions.
He actually
Isn't
played
that
well
funny?
versus Liverpool. He was
Isn't
the
that
best
funny?
player for them against
Isn't that
Liverpool.
funny?
Anfield.
Right? You can say whatever you want about Florenzi and give him assists. The truth of the matter is this: those could be bad deals. Maldini had 45 million that one summer that he bought CDK.
Yes.
Right? We were kind of under the impression that we maybe had more, but that was the budget, and
Elliot sold.
It was a choice between either Botman or CDK. Like, who's the big investment? And I remember at that time tweeting, a serious club gets both, because we needed both.
Yes, of course.
A serious club gets both prospects. We needed a central defender. We needed an attacking midfielder, someone in that attacking department. A serious club gets both. Yeah. We got one. We waited and waited and waited and beat them down until we eventually got him. And I always find it interesting with the Paolo Maldini detractors. And for some reason, people fetishize like slandering Maldini, the director. For whatever reason, I don't know what the hate is towards him in the director role, because I see there's like a select group of people that are like quick to be like, he sucked as a director. He gave Pioli this. But they fail to ever mention and keep the same energy and keep it honest when it comes to this conversation of, okay, now go through the successes he has. Because if you look at the successes, the guys that we still have in this team that we deem as cornerstone players and top players, they're not here, guys. Newsflash, without Maldini.
They're all his signings.
Tonali's not here without Maldini.
Yeah. You know,
people can point to all those things about the exits of players, certain things. But the truth of the matter is this: the core group that helped us win the Scudetto against all odds on a very restricted budget, and the players that renewed for very club-friendly contracts and wages, that does not happen without Paolo Maldini. It doesn't. It just simply doesn't. So I just find it interesting, right? Everyone was so quick to get Maldini out, and they thought, okay, now we're going to have fresh ideas. We're finally going to do this. We're finally going to do that. How do we look now without Tonali and Paolo Maldini?
Well, I also think it was important to have a figure like Maldini at the club.
In moments like this.
If you have your club's, he's either the first or second biggest legend. It's either him or Baresi. So take your pick. But, you know, you have one of them as a hands-on director who is involved in the day-to-day aspects of the club, close to players, involved in transfers, protects the players, like against Napoli in the Champions League quarterfinal, when Spalletti, being the fiery character he is, was having a word with Rafael, and Maldini in the tunnel went over and ended that straight away. You know, okay, you could say Ibrahimovic could do something similar, but it wouldn't be with as much class or decorum as a Maldini.
Yeah.
Maldini just is one of these players. Everyone loves him.
Respected him. Yeah.
Everyone, even Interisti and Juventini, have respect for that man. And you have him as a director of the club. Okay, he did make mistakes. We're not going to sit here and say everything he did was amazing. But there is no director in world football who has never made mistakes. You know,
Morata makes mistakes all the time.
Perez for Real Madrid, when they signed Mariano Diaz and Hazard and all these players.
Garamendi.
Hazard was a horrible deal.
It was a disaster, but he makes up for it with the other stuff he's done. Maldini made up for his mistakes with the likes of Benacer, Teo Hernandez, Leao, Maignan, you know, helping to bring Zlatan back, Tomori. And then when people say, oh, he gave Pioli a new contract, the guy had just won the Scudetto with an average squad.
He was going to get that anyway.
You know,
why made the Champions League multiple years in a row after not making it for over half a decade.
And people say, oh, you should have sacked him earlier on and brought in someone else. But, you know, Pioli was really close to a lot of that squad. Maybe last year,
I think he ran his course.
It was the same. But, you know, the season before when we made the semi-final and in the few years before then when we won the Scudetto, when we got back to Champions League, his man management was the one area that everyone loved.
Yeah.
And it was a Maldini appointment because there were better options out there when we first got Pioli. But he looked at this and thought, you know, he probably saw how he navigated with the whole story situation. and he thought this is a guy who would be great for this club, and it was a Maldini appointment. And I just don't look at Redbird, Moncada and Fulani, and I just don't look at them as guys who know football. Moncada's a scout, which he's good at, but to give him the power of signings, I don't think it's right. He's using too much data in signing these players. You need experts to come in and actually have a look.
Yeah,
at
he's a feel too. Not to cut you off, Christian, but sometimes there's also that sort of feel when you sit down with a player, like, does this guy actually understand? Can he play at this club?
Yeah.
But beyond what he did at a previous club and the algorithms and the data and all these sorts of things, It's like the eye to look across the table at a player and say, like he did with Teo, and say, you can play at Milan. There's a certain energy that comes from someone like Maldini and some of these other, high up, legends at some of these other top clubs, where there's like a respect and understanding. Whoa, Paolo Maldini thinks I can play at Milan. Yeah. That's huge. Every single video, even Tomori, when he did a video, he said, when Paolo Maldini called me, he was like, this is AC Milan. Like, oh, hell yeah, I want to play for like that. There's something to that. And I agree with you. I think that Moncada, had a very good eye for talent. A lot of the names that he, was after, a lot of times in those markets that for whatever reason, we couldn't get deals over the line because of restrictions. A lot of those players that many people tended to like Samakin and the list goes on and on and on. Yeah. But I agree with you, Christian. I think that it's one of those things where now all of a sudden he has a face, right, Moncada. Everyone didn't even know what the guy looked like for a long time. And now all of a sudden he steps into this role, and it's like you have to face the fan base. You're having to be in front of the fan base. You have a face to your signings, and everything that's happening right now is a reflection on Jerry. It's on Furlani. It's on Moncada. And I think for many of these reasons, and Ibrahimovic, of course, the guy says he's the boss. Okay. Well, so far your signings, pal, ain't working out too well.
Which is, can we talk about that structure now? Because this really bothers me, and then we'll get to Terzic and then finish up with the derby because we're already around like 40 minutes.
Yeah.
How is Zlatan now in charge? How does this make any sense? How does it make sense?
Anything. Everything in that club is, you got Jerry Cardinale, who is the boss. You've got Moncada and Fulani, who are his capos, let's say.
Right.
Everything, right? Ibrahimovic is just a mouthpiece for these guys. He's got no influence whatsoever. They use him because of how they can market the club around him. So, we've got Ibrahimovic in this. He's just a mouthpiece for them. He's got no influence. He doesn't sit down and sign these players.
A face.
They wheel him out because they don't have the charisma to do it themselves. And
which is whatever. I guess Morata says he joined because he got this phone call from Zlatan, but Zlatan is like there's so many different things that we see him doing, right? He's sitting at the press conferences of when they sign players. He's the one answering questions, right? Something a sporting director would do. But he's also going on the Tonight Show and CBS and being the face of all these interviews in the United States. And then
show Speed.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the next one as well. He's doing streams with Speed and during the transfer market, by the way, during that entire thing. And it's sort of like, okay, it's one thing if you want to be an ambassador and help push the brand, which is not a bad idea.
Right.
But if you want to do that, also be the director, also be this sort of figurehead and transfer with these negotiations. Maldini, we knew what his job was. It was to improve the team. He was there day to day on a consistent basis, talking with the players, sort of being a liaison between ownership, management, even the manager and the players themselves, right? Like he was at the focal point of it. He was like the nucleus. The fact that like Zlatan is just all over the place, then Scaroni pops in answering questions on things that you're like, what part in this do you have? Like what good of use is what you're saying? Just even some of his comments on Leao last year, I believe, were just silly and nonsensical that everyone was like, why are you saying anything at all? And to me, it's just annoying because what is the real ambition and project here? Is everything hinging on this stadium?
Yeah.
When are you finally going to start spending more? You're not even transparent. I would be so thrilled and happy. I wouldn't be happy because the club would still be in a poor position, but I would be so much happier if the ownership came out and said, yeah, we can't spend as much as the fan base wants to because we have financial fair play issues until 2026. If that's the case, then just say that. Then don't give this runaround of we have this big ambitious project. We're willing to spend all this money on someone like Joshua Zirkzee, got other players at other positions. Big for Milan is supposed to be what happened in 2017, right? Even though it went poorly. But the ambition of the project in 2017 is big for Milan. Waiting out for Pavlovic, 15 million for Emerson Royale, 13 million for Morata is not big for Milan. That's not big.
No.
That's big for Bologna, maybe. But this is not big for Milan. And that's the problem because the disconnect is not there. They need somebody that's a far better PR person to be talking to the fans in relation to that. Because Boban, as much respect as he holds for Ibrahimovic, I'm sure you both saw the interview, he clearly does not take whatever role he has seriously. Because he's like, what? And Bonetti, I think, translated it. He's basically saying like, well, I hope you understand what your role is at the club because no one else does.
Yeah.
And that's pretty damning.
Yeah,
that's pretty damning. And Boban never shies away, obviously.
They interviewed Zlatan after the game. And Boban had said in an interview last week, I'm not even sure what this guy does. And Boban was in the studio with Fabio Capello. I believe it was Capello. And Ibrahimovic basically says, oh, you still don't understand what I do. And Boban said, well, nobody understands what you do. And Ibrahimovic went, well, I'm the boss and everyone follows me. After we've just lost and been embarrassed at home.
And then he went on vacation. So he wasn't even at the Olimpico for Lazio, which is like, I guess there's no good time to go on vacation with this job. But I mean, it's just poor. And now apparently he made the phone call to Terzic. And we obviously saw De Rossi got sacked this morning by Roma. So this opened up a couple of things. I know Skira had linked Terzic to them, but it looks like Juric is, I'm not sure if that's 100%
confirmed now. Juric.
Okay. Yeah. So Juric is in there. So that leaves, from the latest reports from Sky, are Thomas Tuchel, which is sort of a surprise given the salary and stature of who he is. And then Sarri is another, and then Terzic. Terzic obviously out of a job after even reaching the Champions League final with Dortmund. Sarri resigned from his position at Lazio, and then Tuchel has been without a job after leaving Bayern. I mean, this is
the best name there.
Okay, so yeah, I guess we could start there. So your favorite name and best name, and out of the three, you would prefer hiring Tuchel, Christian?
Yeah, it shows ambition. That guy is.
Okay. So expand on that a little bit more. Before.
Well, I mean, he's a serial winner. He was impressive at Mainz. Then when he took over at Dortmund, he did a good job. And what he did with Chelsea, winning them the Champions League, was incredible. And, they never should have sacked him. Look at Chelsea now. That's what I'd say. And his PSG was the most successful PSG ever. They reached the Champions League final. He won all the domestic trophies available, which they had never done.
No slip ups. Yeah.
And that, he managed to kind of, he managed to steady a team of prima donnas and have PSG respect the manager, which has never happened. So, he'd be great, but I worry about him with this management because he's not one to shy away from confrontation.
Yeah, exactly.
Had it out with Todd Bowley, and I think he might look at Cardinale and Redbird, and he might not want the job because he'll just look at Chelsea and think, no thanks, I've had this, been there, done that, I'm not doing it again. So I don't think we'll get him. I think it's the salary that will put them off. He wants 6 or 7 million. They're not going to pay that. I've got no ambition.
Would be happy about that, at least. Yeah. They did not get along. I think they had a little rocky relationship towards
There's been loads of managers and players who haven't gotten along, and then they've worked together again.
This would be the third time they worked together, I believe, because he was with him at Dortmund. So it's interesting. Terzic,
that's a no for me.
I don't get that one. I'd rather just Sarri if it's between the two. Matt, would you agree with that? I think Sarri is like this. Even then, Sarri, like, and I'll let you go in a second. Sorry, but just the thing with Sarri for me, because I think people are quickly looking at like who instantly improves Milan, and that's very important, right? Because they need to get better as soon as possible. But also long term, is Sarri really the guy that like we want a manager who takes us to the next level and pushes us back into contention? But are we silly to kind of look at it like that because Milan are no longer in that position? They've taken so many steps back that they basically have to get someone like Sarri to get back to that level where Pioli had them, and then you go and hire that manager after the fact. I think we might be skipping to get a manager that one we can't afford, two probably wouldn't want to come here with this management and project. So we're really actually going to have to settle for somebody like this, because if you're someone that's like a top candidate, how many of them really want to take over this job at this point where it's at today?
I think that what restricts the conversation here for the next managerial hire is ownership and management. And I think based on their personalities, you almost immediately rule out certain individuals. We talked so much during the summer. I made it very clear I wanted Conte. I don't care how realistic it was, pipe dream, this. I wanted Conte.
Everyone
obviously knew that wasn't going to happen with those in charge. Okay, all right. So you go down the list, and then you look at Conceição, who emerged, right? This was, by the way, like Lopetegui, I didn't want at any point. Conceição, again, a little bit of a rough around the edges type of personality. I think he would have been a great hire for us. We didn't go for him. This ownership, you can sense, wants a very specific personality and one that is going to basically cater to whatever they want. And it's not going to be very outspoken. You're not going to get this sort of bombastic, enigma on the bench that's going to be calling out orders. And I think for that reason also too, I don't think Sarri fits in the personality sense.
No,
I just don't see it. I know he plays a 4-3-3. For one, it takes time for his teams to gel and mesh. We don't have that luxury of time. Number two, it's one of those instances where he's going to require very certain players, and there might be guys in this team that truthfully don't fit. So now you're having to scrap maybe a lot of the workings of the previous two markets, right? The summer markets. I think it's going to be someone in a similar personality, someone that hasn't maybe accomplished much, that they would go with in a stopgap situation. I think if I'm talking personality and fits and just kind of thinking more so down the road, that if this is management, this is the ownership we have that might fit. I feel like Max Allegri is not someone that wouldn't fit. He costs a lot of money. I'm strictly throwing money out of it because it's not. I truthfully don't think if it's not a money conversation, I think Max fits in a certain sense where it's results. You kind of know what type of football he's going to play, all these sorts of things. And he's the type of buttoned up, suited type of individual that I think Ibrahimovic, who worked under him, when he was a player, right, would respect. He's won trophies, which is obviously, I know, a big thing here. I know, Christian, you're a big proponent of. Has he won trophies, right? That's huge.
It's how success is measured.
That's how success is measured, right? If we're talking like upper echelon and then there's levels to it, right? Like Fonseca, we might think is a good coach, but he doesn't have like the extensive trophy record that gives people that confidence. Yeah. So Milan are in a very difficult situation. I don't see anyone like a Tuchel or a Allegri or someone in that more established, prominent category that's going to join this disaster mid-season. And I think that's what we saw with Conte last year, where everyone was saying, well, Conte might go here. These coaches are smart. They're going to sit out. They'll have a sabbatical year, and then they're going to handpick because they earned that right as a coach with their body of work to say, I'll sit this one out. Coaches come and go. Some big club is going to come for me, and they're going to offer me that opportunity with a clean slate, which is what I want of a summer market, to understand the project and the vision and all these sorts of things. Any smart coach that has pedigree is not joining Milan in this shit show disaster because it's going to reflect on them in their next job potentially.
I think Tuchel would be more inclined to wait and take a year out
Yes.
because of the Bayern disaster. But
Yep.
his stocks haven't taken a hit because people look at Bayern and they will look at the situation rather than him. Whereas I don't think he would arrive, but if Allegri joined, I wouldn't be surprised because I think his stocks have taken quite a big hit. You're seeing more European clubs hiring these project managers who are the mold of Pep.
Yeah.
Allegri, a lot of clubs probably look at him and look at the football he played and see him as perhaps outdated, maybe a relic.
Boring, all those sorts
I think for European football, he's a mess. But
maybe, but when he was with that Juve team, I think Juve were just such a mess. That
I agree. It's a mix of things, yeah.
I think he could look at Milan and think, I could really build my stocks back up. And that's why I wouldn't be too surprised if he joined. Will it happen? No. You know, he's a fiery character, a very fiery character. He's not one to shy away from confronting players.
It's so insane.
I don't see it happening.
There's a lot of egos at play too, Martino
point.
and Christian. The ego aspect of this is so interesting because you hear the way Jerry talks, you hear the way Ibrahimovic talks. Big egos. They want to control everything. And I think that's why obviously Maldini was let go. And that's why it's taking a very specific coach and personality for them to bring in. This isn't some sort of situation where you're going to bring in a coach and give him free reign on the market and all these sorts of things. So that's where Milan's at. I think that their options are limited. There's a reason why many clubs, I mean, the quote came out. Sarri said that, I would jump at the Milan job. I think that was
Conte was begging for the job too.
But Fiorentina didn't come for him. Milan didn't come for him. Why is he still sitting there with no job?
Roma didn't come for him.
No one came from him.
It's volatile personality. He struggles with multiple competitions. It's difficult. But the funny thing is, when you price yourself out from managers and you don't want to pay extra money for that, again, this is the same thing in not spending a lot of money in the transfer market. You're actually costing yourself a lot more dollars in the long term. Because if you're not trying to bring in somebody that could stabilize the situation and put you in a better position to compete for trophies and go for top four, you're going to either miss out on the Champions League or you're going to miss out on further progressing your brand. You brag about this brand all the time and how big it is in the United States. You know why Juve got so much more popular in the 2010s? Because they kept winning all the time. Because they kept winning. It's a whole new generation of fans and supporters. Same thing goes for even Napoli to an extent too. Like the amount of fans that Napoli and Roma acquired over that stretch of trying to win and going deeper into competitions, it was evident there. Milan, the most popular that they've been in so many years, was because they were playing great and going deeper into competitions, despite being financially constrained. That's the most mind-boggling thing about this club is how far and how improved they were, despite the fact that they weren't allowed to be financially dominant. Like the fact that they couldn't even get into that window where they're able to spend whatever they want for the most part and get whatever manager that they want too. They're not even a desirable spot now. It's really just for, we talk about players having reclamation projects for their career. The same is going to be for the manager now. Like there isn't going to be any proven top dog at this point. But I don't know where it'll go. And apparently everyone is saying that it depends on the result for this derby, which to me is just silly. It's stupid. It makes no sense because we all know what's going to happen. They're going to lose this one. And they're going to lose by multiple goals. I'd be stunned if Inter don't score at least 3. Lautaro has yet to score this season. He's likely not to start today against Manchester City.
He's saving it for us.
You just know he's going to break out. And the rest of the team is still really good. And what did I say last episode, Matt? If they play poorly today, who are they going to take it out on? The one team they always beat up on. And the fact that they can't even go into a derby, and a derby is supposed to be any given Sunday, really. That type of anything can happen in a derby. We have been rendered to how much are Milan going to lose by. And that's damning because they're going to break another record that they just set on consecutive derby losses, Christian. And would you really? Does it make sense to sack Fonseca out of it after that? Wouldn't you just sack him now?
I think they won't sack him now. They'll wait until the derby because they will look at, okay, let's look at the tougher games. He's had Lazio away, which is a tough game. No matter what you say about Lazio, it's a tough game. You've got your Champions League game at home to Liverpool, and then you've got Inter. You lose all of them, and your only win is against a promoted Venezia, who are awful. Let's be honest.
Terrible. Yeah.
Your one win is against that club. They can't wait anymore. And I don't think it's all his fault, but they have to sack him if we lose Sunday. They can't, because it's just it has actually been a disaster. And we're going to lose on Sunday as well. And I'm not saying we'll get smashed or obliterated or whatever, because we might. But we will lose. There's no confidence in the team. Inter are a machine, And even if they lose to Man City tonight, which, they might do because City never lose at home, they're not going to lose badly. It will be a close game, and they'll have so much confidence riding into the derby on Sunday. And they love playing us. And after last time, when Hernandez and Calabria both got sent off for lashing out at their players, they're going to be looking at them, and they're going to be like, yeah, we are getting our revenge on you for the way you acted last time as well. And it will end badly. And Fonseca will leave San Siro on Sunday knowing that he's going to be out of a job on Monday.
And two, Inter smell blood in the water.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone knows the numbers. The players on that other side, they know the situation for Milan. They know the situation for Fonseca. There's no getting motivated for a derby. Inter, fully aware, they understand, and this was something I mentioned. I went on Sirius XM yesterday, and I was explaining, the feeling of going into this derby, and it's so fascinating too, because you look at where Milan have headed since they won the title, and you see where Inter are headed, and they're headed in two opposite directions. Inter, and everyone that knows Serie A and knows Italian football understand that Inter are well-drilled, well-oiled machine. They got their coach. They got an identity. They have different aims and ambitions right now. They understand they're the class of Serie A still, despite, Juventus and some of these other teams looking good so far this year. Now they're thinking, all right, we got to a Champions League final a couple years ago. We got very close to beating the quadruple that City won, right? Winning team, a team that great. That's what they're aiming for. They're aiming for Champions League. And I think a match like this against City, again, whether they lose, whatever happens, the truth of the matter is that they're a team that I would be stunned that doesn't get up for a Champions League night and puts at least pressure on City and makes that game tight. It tells you a lot about the direction they're headed, despite all their issues financially with their ownership and an ability to spend maybe as much as a team in their position would like, right? They're somehow getting it done. They're getting top players in there. They're getting players like Thuram from Milan, right? That he's another player that's going to love the opportunity. I'm going to show you. I'll show you. I'll show you again, just like he did last year. So, I think the derby, it shouldn't require Milan to get up for this, but I just kind of always reflect back on the Scudetto derbies that were so impactful and that gave fans so much hope. When you have like Tonali, you have Teo getting in the face of Dumfries. Where's that? Where's even the derby the season after?
It was just Calabria
Leao scored the 2 goals off the back of the Scudetto. Everyone was like, Milan are flying. They're flying. We're so far removed from that I have no hope going into this derby. And people can't blame me. I agree with you guys. I think Inter win this game. I think it could be one of those instances too where Milan puts so little pressure and force on Inter that maybe the scoreline doesn't look so lopsided. Maybe it's not 3-4-0, but it's 2-0 comfortably, and Milan do nothing to threaten Inter at all in that game. That's how confident I am with this team.
Yeah, it reminds me a bit of when Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was at Man United in one of his final games. They lost 2-0 to Man City in the derby. But they were so bad, it was even worse than when they had lost the week before to Liverpool, where I think it was like 4 or 5-0, something really, really high.
It's like they weren't even close in the game.
And it was a worse performance, even though the goals weren't as high. And I think Sunday will be maybe not the 5-1 like last year, but I think it will be a very well beaten men against boys. If Inter really wanted, they could have had more. And I really worry about that game Sunday, not because I think that it will damage the club, because the club's already damaged anyway, but I think that this is what could potentially kill the season.
I think it gives more eyeballs again as to what's happening, because it's still one of the biggest games in the world. It's one of like the 5 biggest derbies on the planet, so people are still going to be tuning in.
Yeah,
I can't even think, and people used to say all the time, even during the banter era, there were certain games even against Juve where they're night and day a better club and team, that I was like, okay, maybe if a couple things bounce our way, we have a chance at a result here. I don't even remotely feel close to that when it comes to these games. These are not even close. I think it's so embarrassing that it constantly comes to that. I think that Inzaghi is going to actually use us and treat us like any other game. The beatdown point of it, where it's like, 5-6-1, I bet you he does his trademark thing where he makes a bunch of substitutions early, and that they're ahead 2-3. Like, even if they're up 1-0, I wouldn't even be shocked if he subs out players. Or down 1-0. I don't think we're even going to. I think there's a guarantee that they'll concede at least 2 goals. I'd be stunned if it's not that. And to me, I think the last question would be, we talk about manager security. When do the director's job securities come into question? Because Moncada, I believe, has a contract expiring in June.
Yeah.
Where do they go? And you have to point to what and who Jerry knows in this business. And he doesn't know a lot of people. He knows Billy Bean and people at FSG, and he knows, I believe his name is Damien Comeli. Or Comoli, I don't know how to say it properly. He used to work for Spurs, and he's been at Toulouse for quite some time now, and he's been linked with the director job at Milan. There isn't that much of a bright future. The only way it turns around is if he manages to break bread with Maldini and apologize, like George Steinbrenner did to Billy Martin, and that'll never happen.
Maldini, even if Cardinale reached back out to him, Maldini would never put himself in that situation again.
No.
And
I'm not sure.
I wouldn't either, because I would look at this and be like, no thanks. That's that.
He was meticulous about how and when he accepted jobs. So we'll give a quick prediction, then a final scoreline. Matt?
I go 2-0. I think Milan get outplayed. I think they maybe have some moments. I don't think they take those moments. And I think I agree with basically however you guys framed it. I think that the scoreline is not going to be indicative of the domination that I think Inter are going to have on us. I think that they're going to be in one of those positions where they control the game so extremely well. They start bringing guys off, and it's one of those, they take the foot off the gas a little bit, and it's one of those like, all right, we can have this game, we can score more, but we're not going to insult you too much. And it makes it even more insulting that they kind of have that much dictation on the game. So I think it's actually going to be 2-0 for Milan. And, obviously Fonseca, his seat gets hotter, and potentially he's out of a job.
Christian?
Yeah, exactly the same as Matt, 2-0. And I'll just echo exactly what he said. But I do think that this will be the game where Fonseca is sacked afterwards as well.
One question I want to ask, though, real quick to you guys, Martina, before you give your prediction. Because I remember in one of the later derbies that Pioli had, he was in a similar situation as far as like, we need a result. We're having a derby coming up. And then he went with like an outrageous formation. Remember
he went with a 3-5-2 formation.
Do you think that Fonseca does any sort of changes at all to his formation, or he sticks to his 4-2-3-1? Because he said 4-3-3 doesn't work. 4-2-3-1 is the type of formation. Do you guys see any changes here?
I mean, there was 4-4-2 maybe. He was playing Tammy.
I know he played that with in
he
the
was playing
Venezia
Tammy
game
and Morata at the same time. Maybe he puts Reinders. Well, he also said Fofana and Reinders can't play next to each other. So in a 4-4-2, both are sitting. Like I don't know. I just to me, I think it's gonna be 4-0.
Wow.
I think it'll be 4-0. I know where you guys are coming from, maybe a little bit tighter. They can't defend at all. Like they cannot. There are going to be so many chances, and they have the best striker partnership in the league.
And the big center back.
And they have Taremi off of the bench.
Yeah, I was going to say that. They got him to bring on too.
Like they have so much firepower. It's going to go badly. Like it's just like it's not even. This is just strictly a matchup. I don't care about like the derby aspect of it. Like
Strictly,
on
yeah.
paper and how it plays out, the way this team plays versus that team is a fucking disaster. They're gonna concede at least 3. I don't see how they.
We'll
I think
early as well.
Yeah,
and
they
it
concede
will
early
be-
quite often.
It'll be the same goal that we always concede. They will attack down their left side. I know DiMarco's injured, so it'll probably be Augusto that plays.
Augusto, who's
They're-
still very good.
Yeah, they'll attack down the left side. Either Emerson or Calabria will be beaten because they can't defend either of them. Tomori will be slow to react, and they'll score with a header, or it will be a ball in the box. And
I think there'll be a penalty too. I think Milan will concede a penalty.
And I wouldn't be surprised if certain players are on the pitch, there's red cards.
Yeah,
because of frustrations.
I think it'll be that sort of implosion.
I'm looking at Hernandez potentially getting sent off again because he loses his head. I think if Calabria plays, he's a Milan fan at heart as well. So, the game, I guess, means a little bit more to them, but they don't show it on the pitch. And they lash out and they get sent off or pick up bookings. So I just think it will be a disaster and it will be the final nail in Fonseca's coffin.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is true. This just came in sort of last second, just because the Twitter account is dodgy. But it's from Vitiello. Supposedly, he said that Conceição is also being considered.
Well, if that's true, why didn't they just get him in May when he was first linked, or June?
I don't know. Why didn't they fire Maldini? It's so many questions. They didn't pursue their number one coaching candidate because of fan protest.
I don't think that's true.
I think it influenced them enough to back away from Lopetegui. And Lopetegui, I think, stated that they were working on him for quite some time. I don't think you get that far into the process and then also base a decision off of fans. Because if that's even like true that the fans had some sort of influence, it's sort of like, why didn't they have influence on any other decisions? Why is this the only decision that they had influence over? If that kind of makes it all doesn't make sense.
I just think we are one of the worst run clubs in Europe.
Out of all the top teams, yeah.
Yeah, out of the top teams, because
of
some
course,
some of these other teams like Everton are just a disaster.
I think like, and it's funny because of the financial firepower that, like a United or Chelsea would have. Those are still better gigs than what this is. But yeah,
even, I mean, I know how badly Chelsea and Man United are run, but there's an idea there. It's a bad idea with Chelsea, but there's a clear vision and an idea. They brought a project manager in. They're signing all these young players. They're going for a long-term project. It's not working, but they have.
It's not stable.
Ideas. Whereas Milan is just, we'll sign him. We won't get this manager because the fans don't like him. So we'll bring in another manager who the fans don't like either, and we'll just hope it works out. They don't know what they're doing. They just want this stadium built so they can sell, move on. That's all they want. But they will never come out and say it.
Jerry picked the wrong country to do that. So,
well, that says a lot about him. How can you think that you can have the ability to build a new stadium in Italy? Wouldn't you have looked at this beforehand?
Yeah.
Juve somehow managed to get it done. Atalanta have had to refurbish their own stadium.
Udinese too, Sassuolo, those teams have.
But they refurbished their own stadiums. They didn't go out, buy land, build new ones. So
It's a screwed up country, but they don't.
Yeah,
The city in particular in this situation is the issue here, because they tried getting them to stay and rent out the stadium, just renovate it. Then they both said no, and then they said, okay, buy it from us, and then they're saying no. And it's really, I think what it's ultimately going to come down to is that they both have to join together to go and get the stadium, and share it. And I think that's ultimately what's going to happen.
which
Whatever's
could,
best for the club at the end of the day is that they have to own their own stadium,
yeah.
and that's just the fact of it.
But I just think they probably underestimated how political Italy as a country is.
Yeah.
Because they probably thought, it's worse here in America. It's another world in Italy.
It's not even like remotely like close. It's just agreeing with the city. Like the second you buy land, you're going to be able to more than likely do whatever you want.
Good luck buying land in Italy.
Yeah, well, and he got the land, and there's some progressions that I don't ultimately know what's going to happen, or how that's going to play out. But Aquino, we appreciate you hopping on, my man.
Yeah.
Appreciate you,
Thanks a lot for having me.
Love the conversation. People can
Yeah.
go and follow you on Twitter at the handle right here that we've had the whole time. It's also in the description. Any other final thoughts before we head out?
I genuinely preferred watching Bantier in Milan to this. That's where I am.
Fair enough. Sant'Angelo, final thoughts and comments.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to have to come on the podcast and talk positively about Milan. That's what I actually want again, or at least feel like we're heading in a direction that's positive, right? And I think I didn't expect to be having these sort of conversations, given that the Scudetto and the semifinal, the Champions League, it wasn't too distant, right? That's not that we're not far removed from that, but I'm hoping we get back there soon. Again, just thank the community for continually supporting us, me, Martino, so subscribing, liking, all that good stuff with the podcast. And, amongst all the chaos and, controversy with this team, the one of the constants we can guarantee with certainty is, the Milan fan base and community on social media and even on YouTube has been great. So, we thank you guys.
Yeah, greatly appreciate it. Follow us at that Milan Pod on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. And again, you could just follow myself at Martino Puccio everywhere. And that's pretty much it. We appreciate all the support and Christian for coming on for today's episode on short notice. I mean, I hope we're all wrong for Sunday, but we'll see. Take care, everybody.